Hey, how's everybody doing? Welcome to Talking Shit with your boy Sophisticated Jerkin. Today I wanted to go over this one podcast that I watch. They do a lot of interviews about finances, business people, and it's called Ice Coffee Hour. And they had the man, the myth, the legend on there, Mr. Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary. And I like this whole interview, but the one segment that I want to focus on is when he was talking about relationships and finances. Cause a lot of times, I try to hone in on that. People just like push that off to the side and don't want to have those tough conversations and stuff. So I like how he was giving advice on like what people should do and how they should view different things. And he was definitely dropping some wisdom and knowledge on this. So let me go ahead and pull up the video. And of course, we're going to break it down. But I definitely like what he was saying, man. And definitely a knowledgeable guy when it comes to this type of stuff.
A few years back in relationships. That was what we actually talked about a lot off camera. I'm a single bachelor living in Vegas, 25 years old. Graham's getting married soon.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Very soon, actually.
Nice.
So he's got a lovely fiance.
Yeah. Great.
Do you have any advice for either of us or for people listening right now that want to improve their relationship or find a relationship?
I wrote a book a few years ago called Men, Women, Money, and I did some research with some divorce lawyers trying to figure out why is it that 50% of marriages end in, failure. And I thought it was about infidelity, but it's not. Most marriages can survive infidelity. What they can't survive is financial stress. So in marriage, what turns out to really matter is that you both share the same financial goals and one doesn't outspend the other and go into bankruptcy. And I think a lot of due diligence is not done because people are in a euphoric state of love when they should be asking questions about where'd you come from, how much debt you have, did you bankrupt feeding your family, are you bankrupt, or, just asking because you find that out anyways after you've been married a few years. But if you don't have a stable plan for building a family pillar around stable finances, you're going to fail.
Let me stop right there. So I like what he was saying off the jump because he was just like, look, you better make sure you align with everything because a lot of times people, when they're talking about divorce, it's always infidelity. And that's what people's mind fixates on. But it's like, nah, it's actually finances. So I always tell people, I'm like, man, you don't want to become a financial burden because, once you do that, the person that's like taking that on, they're going to have burnout. And that's typically what happens. So it could come in many forms. Like he said, overspending. You guys just have different spending habits. You're not aligned properly. Somebody might be big into investing. The other one's just like, nah, I want to hold on to it. So you got to have all these conversations, before you just jump in there. And like he said, most people in that state of emotions, caught up in that, they're infatuated. So they just skip over these conversations because, like I said, they just like fixated on the looks. In a lot of cases, so they're like, all right, man, I don't want to have these conversations because I don't want to piss that person off. Or I think sometimes people will have an idea what that person is, but it's just like I said, they don't want to have that tough conversation because they're just trying to hold on to that person. It's almost like, let me get them deep in love and maybe they'll conform to what I like and stuff. So that's what I typically see with a lot of people. But I like how he captured it. He was just like, yeah, a lot of people are emotional and they just refuse to have this conversation. And this is what typically breaks up a lot of, marriages. So this is why people need to put more emphasis on this because, yeah, if you are not aligned financially, it's a wrap. You definitely going to have some gridlock down the line. And especially when you start having kids and stuff and responsibilities start kicking in, that's when people are going toe to toe and stuff.
You already are failing 50% of the time within 7 years.
So what are the questions that you should ask and how soon should you ask them? Because I'm guessing if you're on a first date and you just ask, what's your credit score? That might be a bit of a turnoff.
Maybe
to a
not.
lot of
That's
people.
that was my strategy.
Definitely not for Graham. Graham would love to ask and answer that question. Yeah. But when do you bring up these questions?
Third date, second glass of wine.
You have it mapped out to a science.
Third date, second glass of wine. I'll tell you why. By the time you've got to a third date, both sides are interested. And you start to feel that way on the second date, but you don't want to press too, hard issues on the second date. You're still kind of getting to know each other. Third date, now you're really starting to think, well, is this person going to be part of my life in one way or another? It's a great time to introduce the idea that you care about that to see what reaction your significant other has. If you can't talk about money with them or they freak out, you're not going to have a fourth date. That's my guess. You got to have something in common regarding financial stability. And that's the right time to have the conversation saying, I'm really interested in you. I'm just wondering how you think about money. Like, let's talk about money.
But don't you think
Hold on, I got to pause right there. So I definitely think he's got a good methodology. Wait to the third date, second glass of wine. But I'm like Graham, goddamn it, I'm asking on the first date because I hate wasting time, and I just can't. If somebody's bad with finances, I'm out. Like I ain't even playing with it. But I think Kevin's probably got the right formula. I'm just impatient. But regardless, you got to have that conversation out early, because the whole, I say, reasoning behind having those conversations, whether it's like 1 or 3 dates, whatever, it's like, man, you don't want to waste time and put a lot of emotions into that person, because typically when people do that, that's when they start overlooking everything. They're like, all right, well, it might not be that bad. I'm financially savvy, so I'll get us over that hump. That person, they'll change, man. I'll grow on them or something like that. Because you got so emotionally invested in that person that you don't even want to like let go at that point. So it's like, nah, get that out early. If y'all don't align, man, no hard feelings. You give that little pound and you keep it pushing, man, and find that person that's aligned with you. Because like he was saying, like most marriages, like 50% fail at year 7. You don't want to spend all that time with somebody. Then now when you get a divorce, like you got to spend money on lawyers, divided up assets, because that's another thing that a lot of people lose money on. Is like when money starts splitting, then if y'all have a kid, then where the kid's going. So that's another impact on your family, and it's costly too, because it's just like, okay, now our household is divided financially. So it's just like, nah, don't even play with it. Like, don't try to be no superhero and push it down the line and try to take on everything. It's like, nah, finances is critical. So I like how he's like, you have that conversation up there early. So I definitely agree with him. He's probably got the better approach. I want to get it out a little earlier because I'm cheap.
think it's a good thing if one person's really financially responsible, one person isn't, and you can teach them? Because then it would be bad for everyone if just financially irresponsible people are just getting together and then having kids and teaching that to them.
And who
Fuck no. Before I go back to that, I'm not into teaching anybody. Shout out to anybody that does, but no. Either you got it or you don't. But let me get back to this.
Who cares more about financial responsibility? Do you find it's men or women care
Women.
more?
Yeah, they're smart. They understand it's not going to work if there's no money. I mean, it's that simple. I don't agree with that idea. You can teach them. They may have bad habits, bad spending habits that came from years ago. You can't change. It's really worth doing diligence in that area, because later when it affects you, it really destroys lives. You have, collectors of debt, losing assets, losing houses. It's all bad. It's all bad. And so it's better to just resolve that, saying, look, if you believe in the same way I do, I'd like to control our spending. Maybe when they will move in together, whatever, any conversation you can have about money. If they don't want to talk about it, that's a huge red flag. Huge red flag.
What if they have?
Hold on, I'm gonna stop right there. But I like how he answered his first question. He was just like, but he doubled back to that one where he was like, I don't think you should be teaching somebody, because like most people are creatures of habit. And then another thing is, it's just like, man, if you want to be a successful man and you're ambitious, like I was kind of mentioning earlier, it's just like, you don't want to, it's hard enough to try to climb up like that. And the more time you got to spend on somebody that, because you just didn't want to vet them out, it's going to keep you away from that growth. So I think guys need to sometimes, we get in that Superman phase, and it's just like, man, it ends up not working out. So it's just like, with me, when I tell the story all the time, when I was like, in that dating phase before I met my wife, it was critical that they had some financial literacy. And if they didn't, I was gone out of there. Like he said, early in them dates, I wasn't like, well, maybe, this girl's cute. I was like, hell nah, because I just knew how critical it was to be financially literate. And me and my wife was able to grow, and, we have a pretty streamlined life, because of that. So I think it's critical for guys to definitely, not go that route. And same thing for females. Like if a female's financially savvy and a guy's got bad spending habits, it's like, like people sometimes, like I said, they get caught up in the infatuation and all that, the traction. And it's like, oh, I'll teach this person, and very rarely works. I think somebody has to want to change. And a lot of times I think people end up becoming that parent to that person, because it's like, hey, you need to do this. And then that's when people are like, oh, that person's nagging me, or, you're trying to be my father, you're boring. So it's like, nah, leave that shit alone. It's very short term. You might ride it out for a little bit, because when people get in relationships, they kind of hold on for a while, but it's like that shit is definitely going to crash. And then also, like he said, if somebody just don't want to talk about finances, because I see that a lot, like I'll ask people, I'm like, man, y'all have them conversations? Like, man, they really don't want to talk about nothing. I'd be like, get up out of there. So I'm glad he said that, like, hey, that's a red flag. And I tell people, I'm like, if somebody don't want to talk to them, then you need to put an assumption on them. That's how I operate. I'm like, if you don't want to talk about something, that means your shit is bad, and I'm out. Because one thing with people that's successful, got their shit together, they like talking about that stuff. People that's good with finances love talking about finances. Not from a bragging point, but it's just a subject of interest to them. So yeah, nah, somebody don't want to talk, get up out of there. It's going to save you a lot of trouble. And I was saying this on another video that I just did, because I'm trying to talk a little bit about more money concepts. But out of all the thousands of guys that I met, because I was in the military, did a lot of traveling, lived in a bunch of different states, played a lot of sports, I probably have like under 10 friends that are successful. The rest of them, they're struggling. So when I'm talking to people, and it all tied back to like those guys operated off of superficial beauty, and that person didn't have no financial literacy, and they're playing catch up, and I'm in my 40s. So it's a sad thing. But most guys, if you see that they're not doing too well, it's because they avoided these type of conversations, and they just went basically off of like looks and stuff, versus getting somebody that actually knew about finances, that aligned with them properly. So like, if you want to see a successful person, trust me, they're having them conversations. They looking at stuff for the most part. But people that's not doing too well, yeah, they operate off of desires and infatuation. So it kind of goes hand in hand.
Massive debt.
Find someone else.
And how do you know when to settle down?
Hold on, I do like that question. I got to stop it there. So he asked him, he was like, man, what happened if they have massive debt? Kevin was like, find somebody else. And it kind of ties back to the other one. It's just, I always try to tell people, I'm like, okay, if you are building up and say you got yourself to a good position, and then you go and you marry somebody that has like massive amounts of debt, what you really just did was just like put yourself back in the rears. So say like you just neutralized everything, and then that person had like 110,000 worth of debt. Now you put yourself back in a position where you're playing catch up. So it's like, I know you like this person, but I like what Kevin was saying earlier. It's like, man, if you ask these questions earlier before you get emotionally invested, it's just like, man, how much time and effort you save yourself. Because there's people out there that got their shit together. So I think a lot of times people don't think that exists, but it's like, no, it might take a little bit more time to find them, but that time is worth it. Because if you had all your bills neutralized, now you're going to start getting in that growth phase, because it's like, okay, man, I got money freed up. I can start investing, and man, I got the debt taken care of. You meet somebody else that's like that. Now you guys are both growing faster. But it's like, man, once you start taking on debt, trying to be Superman and all that shit, teaching people, man, you put yourself back in that deficit. Now you got to build out of that. But by that time, this is what typically happens with people when you see just life play out numerous times when you get older. It's like, okay, they start trying to do the right thing, but it's like, okay, they have a kid. All those costs come with that. So it's like that hole gets deeper. Then, you get a house, hole gets deeper. Kid 2 comes, hole gets deeper. Car breaks down, hole gets, life is life. And so it's just like, that's what happens. And it's just like, they can never get out of it. Somebody might get sick, house maintenance, car maintenance, all the stuff that's blindsided people. It's just like, you know, that's why it's critical to stay ahead and build up. So when you do have those like situations, it's just like, okay, I could pay that out. I could pay that off real quick because we're established. But people just don't think this stuff out. So they just jump in it. And then when it starts getting overwhelming, that's when everybody's fighting. And then the divorces happen. So it's like both of y'all got all this debt. Now at this point, you divorce. So you're still splitting up the money because it's like child support and stuff. But now it's just like nobody is, you know, passing on generational wealth. You can't do nothing now because it's like all you guys got really as an asset is just debt. So yeah, that's why it's bad to do all this stuff.
I think it just comes naturally. It's really, if you want to have a family, you really don't want to go too late. I mean, you know, I didn't get married till I was 36. That's pretty late, but we had kids right away. The one thing I would have changed in my life, if I could have, I would have got married a lot earlier, a lot younger, and had more kids sooner. That would have been better, because now I really realize the value of that, and the family is so important. But you don't know that when you're young, and you keep pushing it off. But that's why you're seeing a reversal in trend. You're seeing a lot of people getting married in their early 20s now. They kind of figured it out. They want to go back to the way it was.
Is it? So I'm getting married 34,
Yeah.
and I don't want kids for another like few years at minimum, just because I
Well,
kind
it
of feel
depends.
like
How
I
old
want
is your
to.
wife?
She'll be 26.
Yeah, okay. So she can wait a few years, but you know, you also want to be alive when they make high school. It's sort of
Right.
you want to kind of
Yeah, but if I could live until 120, I feel like I've got
well, you
like plenty
might,
of
but
time.
it's just in case you don't.
Yeah.
It's the idea
Yeah.
that you probably want to have some kids by the time you're 36. If you just look at the clock of how it works and the amount of energy it takes to raise two kids, even if, you know, there's a lot of energy, particularly on if the wife is going to stay home, or maybe not, maybe you do. It doesn't matter. But the amount of energy is a lot. People don't realize it till they're in that second, third year. Like you have one kid that's 4 and one that's 2. That is maximum energy. Like it is just a burnout.
What's difficult specific?
Let me stop it right there. This is I like this segment right here because this has always been a topic where it's just like, hey, what's the proper age to have kids? And it's funny because, you know, me and my wife got married early, had our kid early. And we was always like looking at everybody. We're like, they're having kids like later. We're like envious. We're like, damn, man, they get to go out, kick it and stuff. And then it's funny because like now that, you know, we done reached our earning potential, we just have one kid, but it's just like our son is like old enough. He's in college now, and it's just we're still young. So now we're looking back at it. We're like, damn, we kind of made the right decision because we got all this like energy and, you know, free time now. And then everybody just kind of flip flop. So our friends that was like having their kids later in life, they're like, man, we don't get to do nothing. Man, y'all just like empty nesters. Y'all chilling out. So yeah, it's definitely funny how stuff kind of plays out. But if just looking at it now, like I said, when I was younger, I was like, yeah, no, I would have had them later. But now I'm like, definitely would have had them earlier. Just would have been a little more focused and stuff like that. But I do see the benefits of like what he's talking about as far as energy, because yeah, when you're younger and then also when you're going through that like growth building phase, you don't have those high expectations of always doing stuff because, you know, your money's limited at that point. So when me and my wife was growing, it was easier to, I think, sacrifice mentally for us and not be like, oh, feeling like we're losing out because we used to kick it all the time. So we was just focused on our kid and growing in our careers, where it was just like, you know, it started freeing up over time. You know, when kids get older, it gets easier and stuff like that. And then now we're still young. So it's like when he starts having his family, we're going to be, you know, fairly young to like enjoy that and not be like burnt out, like kid run like 2 feet, you're like breathing all heavy and shit. So nah, I definitely see what he's saying about like energy. And I do think people need to take all this stuff in consideration because yeah, you see some of these parents now, they're going to be like, you know, late 50s and in their 60s when their kids are like in high school. And I'm like, boy, y'all just don't know, boy. Because like if your kid does sports, because my son, he was in like wrestling, and you know, you going to wrestling meets, you sitting in that thing for like 8 hours and you traveling all kind of places. It's all over the place. So yeah, me and my wife was able to do it because like he said, we had that energy, and like I was mentioning, our expectations was just small at that point. We was like content with just like minor stuff versus like if we would have had like all these like life experience, traveled all the time, we would have felt like, oh man, we can't do nothing anymore. So I see that happen with a lot of people. They're like, oh, you know, everything just changed. And we're like, we're getting that on our back end. So yeah, it's definitely something to consider. But all right, y'all, I just wanted to show y'all this segment. I think Kevin Leary definitely had a lot of wisdom, and shout out to the two gentlemen on there, man. I think they was asking a lot of good questions. I love their podcast, man. Definitely have a lot of great interviews and stuff. So yeah, check them out. But all right, y'all, peace.